It was a dark and stormy night in the small town of Castle Rock, Maine. The wind was howling through the empty streets, as if it were a pack of wolves searching for their next prey. The only light came from the flickering street lamps, casting eerie shadows on the abandoned buildings. The only sign of life was at the local diner, Nancy's Kitchen, where a group of regulars huddled together, sipping on cups of steaming coffee. They all knew each other by name, and they all had one thing in common. They were all afraid of the dark. As they sat there, discussing the recent strange occurrences in town, a figure appeared at the door. He was a tall, thin man with a long coat and a fedora pulled low over his face. He stepped inside, his boots making a loud clacking noise on the linoleum floor. "Can I help you?" asked Nancy, the owner of the diner. The man didn't answer. He simply stood there, staring at the group with cold, dead eyes. Everyone in the diner froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They all knew who this man was. He was the one they had been talking about. The one who had been causing the strange occurrences in town. Without a word, the man turned and walked out of the diner, disappearing into the darkness. The group at the diner sat in silence, too afraid to move. They all knew that whatever was happening in Castle Rock, it was only the beginning. The storm outside continued to rage, as if it were a reflection of the fear and uncertainty that now gripped the town. And so, the people of Castle Rock waited, knowing that the worst was yet to come. The next day, the town was in a state of panic. Everyone was talking about the strange man who had appeared at the diner and the eerie feeling that he had left behind. Some even claimed to have seen him wandering the streets at night, always just out of reach and always shrouded in darkness. Detective John Thompson was the first to investigate. He had been with the Castle Rock Police Department for over 20 years and had seen his fair share of strange cases. But this one was different. There was something about the man that made John's skin crawl. John started by interviewing the regulars at Nancy's Kitchen, but they were all too afraid to provide much information. They were more interested in keeping a low profile and avoiding the man at all costs. John then decided to pay a visit to the local hospital to speak with the staff and patients. However, they also had nothing to say. They were too busy trying to cope with the strange occurrences that had been happening in the hospital. John was beginning to feel like he was getting nowhere. That is, until he received a call from an old friend, Dr. Michael Langford. Dr. Langford was a renowned psychologist and had treated some of the most disturbed individuals in the state. "John, I think I might have some information that could help with your case," Dr. Langford said. "Can you come and see me?" John agreed, and soon found himself in Dr. Langford's office, sitting across from the good doctor himself. "John, I believe that the man you are looking for is suffering from a severe case of dissociative identity disorder," Dr. Langford said. "He is most likely experiencing multiple personalities, each one more dangerous than the last." John listened intently as Dr. Langford went on to explain the symptoms of the disorder and how it could be treated. He knew that this was the key to solving the case, but he also knew that it was going to be a long and difficult road ahead. As John left Dr. Langford's office, he couldn't shake off the feeling that the man he was hunting was not just a man, but something far more sinister. And he knew that he had to be careful, because one wrong move could mean the end of everything. With the knowledge provided by Dr. Langford, John was able to track down the man's whereabouts and finally confront him. The man, whose name was revealed to be Jack, was living in a rundown cabin on the outskirts of town. John approached the cabin with caution, his hand on his gun, ready for anything. But as he entered, he found the place empty and abandoned. The only thing that remained was a journal, filled with Jack's thoughts and experiences. As John read through the journal, he was horrified by the details of Jack's dissociative identity disorder. He discovered that there were at least 4 distinct personalities, each one taking control at different times. One was a kind and gentle soul, who had no memory of the terrible things that the other personalities had done. Another was a violent and aggressive individual, who took pleasure in causing harm to others. And then there was a third, a mysterious figure known only as the Darkness, who seemed to be the one pulling the strings. John realized that this was much bigger than he had initially thought. He knew that he had to act fast before anyone else got hurt. He gathered a team of officers and set out to capture Jack and bring him to justice. But as they closed in on him, they were met with unexpected resistance. The Darkness personality had taken over and was determined to fight to the death. A fierce battle ensued, with bullets flying and buildings crumbling. In the end, John and his team were able to subdue Jack and bring him into custody. But as they stood victorious, John couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He knew that this was not the end of the story, that the Darkness was still out there, waiting to strike again. And so, John and the people of Castle Rock were left to wonder what other horrors lay hidden in the darkness, waiting to be unleashed. With Jack in custody, John and his team began the process of uncovering the full extent of his crimes. They scoured the cabin and surrounding area, looking for any clues that would help them understand the mind of the man they had captured. They discovered a hidden underground basement, filled with gruesome evidence of Jack's violent tendencies. There were blood-soaked chains and instruments of torture, as well as photographs and videos of his victims. As they dug deeper, they also uncovered a connection between Jack and a string of unsolved murders that had occurred in the area over the past decade. It was clear that Jack had been active for much longer than they had initially suspected. John felt a sense of disgust and anger as he realized the full extent of Jack's depravity. But he also knew that they had to keep a clear head and focus on the task at hand. They brought Jack in for questioning, but he wasn't cooperative, his different personalities taking turns in controlling him. It was a difficult process, but eventually, they were able to extract a confession from the gentle personality. The trial was swift and Jack was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. John felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that the monster was finally behind bars, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that it was not over yet. He knew that the darkness was still out there and that it would always be a threat to the people of Castle Rock. He made it his mission to keep a close eye on Jack and to make sure that he never had the opportunity to harm anyone again. But as the years went by and John retired, he couldn't help but wonder if he had truly succeeded in bringing an end to the darkness or if it was only waiting for the right moment to strike again. The end of the story leaves us wondering, what other secrets and horrors lie hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered? Years passed and John's fears proved to be well-founded. Jack's darkness personality had been biding its time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to escape. One day, a group of inmates overpowered the guards and took control of the prison. Jack saw his chance and made a break for it. disappearing into the night. John, now retired and living a quiet life, was pulled back into the investigation when the news of the prison break reached him. He knew that it was only a matter of time before Jack began to wreak havoc once again. He contacted his old team, and together, they set out to track down Jack and bring him to justice once and for all. But their search proved to be more difficult than they had anticipated. Jack had gone to great lengths to conceal his whereabouts, leaving behind only a trail of death and destruction in his wake. He seemed to be targeting those who had been involved in his original capture and trial, seeking revenge for what he saw as an injustice. As the body count rose, John and his team knew that they had to act fast. They finally received a break in the case when a survivor of one of Jack's attacks was able to provide them with a lead. They followed the trail to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of town. Inside, they found Jack, holed up and heavily armed. A final showdown ensued, with Jack unleashing his full fury on John and his team. But in the end, they were able to subdue him and bring him back into custody. With the threat finally neutralized, John could finally breathe a sigh of relief. He knew that this time, Jack would never be able to escape again. He had finally brought an end to the darkness that had haunted the people of Castle Rock for so long. But even as he retired for good, John couldn't shake off the feeling that there would always be more monsters lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. And so, he made it his mission to ensure that the people of Castle Rock would always be safe from the darkness that threatened to consume them.